Alright, no fancy intro, let's just get right into it. Last May, I released a full analysis of 2017's Foreign Skies, which you can watch at the links provided in probably a bunch of different places. Here, there, I don't know. Long story short, World War I was a tragedy of the human spirit, and somehow a Canadian-European folk polka punk band managed to capture it in song nearly a century after it ended. But I've already talked about that. Today, I just want to take a moment to highlight one of my favorite songs from the album, Black Letters. Just to pick apart the lyrics and shine some light on an underrated work by an underrated band. If you haven't listened to the song yet, go ahead and mark this video, listen to it for your own reaction, and then come back to this. Anyways, on with the video. Black Letters is a song that examines what was lost when a life was cut short by the Great War. Life, love, and the uncaring gaze of a conflict bigger than anyone or anything that had ever come before it. What's more, it does so with an eye for wordcraft that really sells the raw emotion of it all.
He was just 18 when he saw her smiling face as she danced along the streets of Montreal. And in 1916, she gave her hand for him to hold in the church beneath the ancient city walls.
This right here, this is beautiful. Let's take it one line at a time.
He was just 18.
We start by establishing one of the most important people in this entire song, the soldier, or at least he's not one yet. He's of the right age, freshly a man, but nothing yet hints at any fighting.
When he saw her smiling face as she danced along the streets of Montreal.
And then we throw a girl and a setting into the mix. Classic maneuver. He's a boy, she's a girl, you can't really make it any more obvious.
And in 1916...
Now, this is the first mention of the time period of the song, and it's all we really need to start winding that tension in the back of our minds. Isolated from the rest of the album, it really doesn't hold much weight, but hearing that this is an 18-year-old man doing things around 1916 should really be enough to set some unfortunate realizations in motion as we move along.
She gave her hand for him to hold in the church beneath the ancient city walls.
With that, we jump swiftly from the beginning of the relationship towards arguably one of the highest peaks. The boy and the girl, on the cusp perhaps of man and woman, husband and wife, have made the choice to devote their love and fully give themselves to one another. And I love the phrasing here. Gave her hand for him to hold in the church beneath the ancient city walls. It's poetic, it just flows so nicely, and it gradually reveals more and more of the idea as the sentence progresses. With just 6 lines and little under 40 words, they've told and sold the story of a young couple falling totally and completely in love. This lyricism continues for the rest of the song, and some of its lines continue to stay with me even years after I first heard them. But back to the song. Young couple, marriage, good time, but then there's a but.
But now he lies awake, staring up into the dark at the eyes of a million tiny gods. And when the sun comes up, they'll go over the top for good.
Here, we contrast the happiness in the previous lines by jumping to a time where the man is alone. By now, the listener has probably remembered or realized that this is an album about one of the deadliest conflicts in human history, not a Hallmark Canadian Christmas special. This is a young soldier, in the trenches, mulling over his future as he prepares to fight. As he looks up to the stars, they look back down at him, and he is separated from his love by a mission to protect her. When the stars fade away and the time comes for him to fight, he, and his brothers in arms, will go over the trench barricades like they have for likely weeks or months by now. Except this time, it will be the last time. And maybe he knows that, and he accepts it. So he does the only thing that he can do.
So he writes her black letters. By the time you read these words, there will be no more war for me. There will be only peace.
To quote the Dreadnoughts Bandcamp page, soldiers would compose letters for family to be mailed in the event of their death. One Canadian soldier referred to these as his black letters, and when he was killed, his lover read the words, "Do not worry, my love. By the time you read these words, there will be no more war for me. Only peace." End quote. In the precious last few hours of relative peace before sunrise, a young soldier writes home to his love with words of comfort and reassurance, that by the time she is holding these letters in hand, he will be gone from the war, he will have already been at peace for some time. The grim beauty of that statement is evident clearly in the original words by the Canadian soldier, and adapting them identically preserves, in whole, the sentiment that likely grasped the Dreadnoughts by the eyes and inspired this song. The sentiment that, even though he is dead and gone, she should not worry for him. The strife is over, and he has already had everything he could have ever wanted, except maybe to see her again. With just verse 1, we've already seen the unfortunate story of a marriage cut short, but verse 2 gives possibly another, even more tragic side to the events.
He was her only son, and she rocked him back and forth in the cradle of a tall Alberta grave. He was scarce a man when he answered the call, left her crying as he stepped onto the train.
Now, as far as geography is concerned, Alberta is pretty far from Montreal, so I don't think this is meant to be about the same man. But regardless, it was not just the newlyweds who lost love to a battle. Every man in that war was a husband, a brother, or a son. To some, an only child, still a child, as they had to watch through tears on the day they departed from home for the last time. Standing in a field of grain next to the tracks, a mother embraces her son in fresh press uniform as they rock back and forth together. He was too young for this. He would always be too young for this. But there he was, ready to answer the call and aid his country in his time of greatest need, leaving his poor old mother without her only son, her only hope of progeny, the light and joy of her last 18-odd years, and in his place, a dark cloud of worry that wouldn't be dispelled until long after.
She was all alone, staring at the moon as his body hit the sand beneath Calais. And when the sun came up, his words were on the steps for her.
It's hard to envision with today's luxury of being able to see and speak with almost anyone around the world near instantly, but in the early 1900s, communication was significantly slower, especially for your average person. The radio had been invented in 1890, and was more common by the first 2 decades of the 20th century, but not at a rate where you could wirelessly speak to your son an entire ocean away. Letters and the written word took time to travel. Days to weeks to maybe even months would go by between sending and receiving a message. By the time a response was drafted, sent, and received again, the entire world around them would have changed. That's a worrying thought for the family of a son at war. You think your mother gets nervous when you don't call back while sitting in your college dorm? When and if these people got a message from the front, and that's a pretty big if based on the combined effectivenesses of the military and the North American postal systems, it wasn't much of a relief. At least you received some closure in knowing that they had been alive about 3 weeks ago. For all that you knew, they had died last Sunday while you were singing in the choir. And all the while, you'd either be sitting there waiting for a letter that'll never come, or the normal relief for receiving a message in the mailbox could be swiftly replaced with the grief of a neatly typed "We regret to inform you." That had to be nerve-wracking. And this went on for millions of families for up to 4 years, or until the soldier came home on medical leave, if they were that lucky. Most of those families never even saw a body. And let's not forget, these soldiers went out in waves. Multiple years' worths of 18-year-olds were drafted and sent off to combat. Imagine being a younger brother. Month after month, the number of boys in your town your age slowly dwindles. Half of your high school class likely already gone. You've sat and watched as your father watches your mother worry day in and out about if the next message will come home, and when it might be your turn to join. You're not just grappling with the possibility that your brother might die, but that you might die, and that your family and everyone you know is going to have to deal with the fallout of that. As the clock ticks down to 18 trips around the sun, you will have to look fate in the eye and make your peace. Which brings us to the bridge.
Well, the day will come, we look into the eyes of a fate that is much greater than us all. And by the setting sun, we'll write the words we wish to echo in the hearts of our loved ones should we fall.
Like many before them, the men forsaken to fields of sweat and steel will choose to lower their rifles and raise a pen, to draft the essence of their lives and loves into a few pages to fly or sail across the world, back to the home where they were born and raised.
Those thin dog lines, so delicate and fine, like a road that could show the way back home.
To many, These letters represented a lifeline back to a sane world, a thin rope that snaked its way through muck, rot, blood, and rain alongside a narrow path that they could only wish to follow. But no matter how much they write, the world marches onward.
But at the ending of the day, our memories will fade for good.
The men lost in World War I were essentially a collective. None of their individual lives really accounted to much. Not in a literal sense. They mattered to them, to their family and friends. They were people, individuals with thoughts, wants, concerns, desires, goals, and fears. They had memories. They experienced life. But most of it will never be remembered. These people existed in a time where not every aspect of life was recorded. We can't know what games George Morton Bird played with his little cousins at Joy House, or if James Stokesbury Thorpe proved whether or not he was a quitter in his final days on the machine gun at the Battle of Verdun. What would Clifford Shaves say to his 9 brothers and sisters if he could have seen them one last time? Or Jay Moyer to Violet, or James Fargy to his mother? All of these things we will never know. And what all is left, photographs, news clippings, and old pieces of parchment, are the only memories left of entire lives thrown to the tides of war. At the end of the day, their memories faded for good. Well, except for one thing.
Except for our black letters. By the time you read these words, there will be no more war for me. There will be only peace. Black letters.
Part of why I really like this song is its authenticity, I guess you would call it. Not in the sense that the musicians in question were relaying their actual experiences as soldiers in World War I, but more so in how the music feels. The Fang's voice has a certain roughness to it, a lack of that industry auto-tune polish, owing to his punk stylings. It doesn't detract from the appeal of the song, in fact it humanizes it. It's fitting, given that the subject matter too was rough, raw, and real. Each verse builds a small story, a slice of a life that could have really existed. Small details and flourishes in language use the connotation of the surrounding culture of the war era to flush out full characters in very little actual space. And just as we find ourselves becoming attached to them, we feel their pain and the pain of their families as they are ripped from their lives and promptly snuffed by the war machine. And each time, it comes down to a choice in words. Not just carefully crafted lyricism, but the choice of the soldiers to use words, to send these letters home, to maintain that connection to the real world. Appropriately, at the end of each verse, we are led back to those black letters, a phrase with a double meaning. Not just literal black letters on a stained white page, but black as in death. Death letters, the final few messages sent before a soldier passes in combat. And the beauty of it is, this isn't a meaning I'm baselessly reading into the song. It's not an artistic choice on the behalf of the Dreadnoughts. It's the actual description used by a soldier who experienced the front for himself. The song uses line for line the words of a man trying to comfort his love from a world away. That's authenticity. And that's why this is one of my favorite songs from Foreign Skies. Thank you for watching, and as always, freak out.